This short video is an explanation of how adults learn and a discussion about best practices when working with adult learners. One thing that is critical when working with any type of learner is to be sure it's very clear that we understand their needs and how we can best meet those needs. If you take a look at the request for the swing, you see that marketing requested a 3-tiered swing, sales ordered a single swing with 3 ropes, engineering designed a swing that will never actually swing. When you look here, you can see that the plant made it this way, so it's going to go into the tree. Here's how the crew made it, and what the customer wanted was just a simple tire swing. So when we think about adult learners, there's a lot of things that we want to keep in mind. And being adult learners, this is something that you just want to think about in your own personal experiences with learning. For example, what keeps adult learners most interested in their learning? What research has shown is that adult learners stay interested in courses where it's tied to experiences that they've had in real life, experiences particularly in the world of work. So we want to be sure that as we think about courses that we're really focusing on what experiences do adults have, how can this further someone's career or enhance someone's personal interests. Adult learners generally like school. True or false? This is true. Adult learners generally like school more than traditional learners in the 18 to 24-year-old age bracket, so that one might not be surprising. What type of instruction do adult learners find most beneficial? Adult learners are very particular and very good critics of their instruction. They want everything to be as experiential or as hands-on as possible. So ideally, within about every 15 minutes, adult learners need to be doing something with the information. It can be an online activity, it can be a discussion, but they need to be taking the information and doing something with it that they find authentic and that they find useful. How do adult learners best acquire new information? And adult learners, this is where adults are a little bit different from younger learners. Adult learners have to have new information in context. It has to be able to stick like Velcro to something that is in their past understanding. What type of learning is least effective with adults? When you look at these 4 types of learning that are listed below, for this, adults want to have continuous learning, so building on one concept, understanding how concepts relate is conceptual, contextual within the world of work or within a particular interest area. Adult learners do not generally like repetitive, straight memorization of facts. And what's the number one reason adult learners pursue additional educational opportunities? That is because they have a need for it in their careers. That's the number one reason. They may pursue for other things, but ideally and most commonly, it's because it will somehow advance them in the world of work. So as we move along our voyage, our next stop involves some things to keep in mind. And these come from Malcolm Knowles, who is an expert in adult learning and has studied learning theory for adults for the past 30 plus years. And what he's found is that adults, number one, have to know why they need something. And you might think this is kind of the classic student asking, why do I need to know this over and over? But it really is critical for adults. They want to be able to use this information in context in their world of work or to further another understanding they have of the concept and to build on it. Adults need to have choices and they want to learn in their own way. That's why Online learning, hybrid learning is so popular. Adults want to do this at different times of day. They want to be able to interact differently than younger learners. They want their learning to be experiential, to be hands-on, to be frequently involved with the course at a personal level, not just sitting as in a classroom with a large group of students. Timing has to be adequate, and this includes course length, the time of day, the time of year. It has to fit into the schedule of that individual, or they generally just will not do that. And the process has to be rewarding and encouraging. So along the way, we want to think about reminding learners the new skill they have acquired or new understanding and how will be able to further their career or their understanding of a particular topic. When we think about designing instruction, the process that I've been trained on and used is called backwards design, or UBD, Understanding by Design. And the book that explains this most clearly is by Wiggins and McTighe. And they really developed the concept of understanding by design or backwards design. And it's really a logical methodology. And what I think is most important about it, and what I think makes it so focused for the work that we do in continuing ed, is that you start by identifying your desired results. So when we're working with context experts, we want to ask first, what do you want students to be able to do when they have completed this session or this course? Once they've identified what they want students to do, then the next question is, how are you going to know if they can do that? So what would be acceptable evidence? It could be everything from a discussion to answering questions to being given a case study and being able to adequately analyze and make decisions and evaluate case studies. Then we plan the experiences for students and instruction. And I like the word experiences because it has learners being active participants in their instruction and not passively sitting in a classroom. They have to be involved. Then the instruction is designed. This is at a very high level, and then we get more specific with actually developing what the particular activities might be, how they're going to be linked in the course, what the order would be, and then critically it's very critical that we do this step, which is the pilot testing, and then we revise our instruction, and then we're able to go live with that particular product. Here is an example, and we're going to all participate in doing our own example in just a moment. But my example of how I would design this, and we're just going to take this through the very first steps. If I were teaching someone to play the saxophone, and I were going to do this in 5-hour-long sessions, how would I begin this process? And what I would do when designing this course is I would first determine, what do I expect students to know before they came to take this course? And what would be critical in this place is I would expect that they could read notes. I would want to know if they played an instrument before. And so having a good understanding of who the learner is makes it easier for us to craft a course that really meets their needs. Once we've assessed what our previous knowledge expectations are, then we can look at exactly what our results are and what evidence would be acceptable for that. So blowing into the instrument correctly would be the result that I would expect, and my evidence would be that I could watch someone, hear someone do that. Another result is that they could position their fingers correctly, and again that would be evidenced by actually doing the activity. Playing notes in just one octave, so there'd be just a few notes that they would learn to play, and then playing a simple song of their choosing. And this gets at the fact that there would be a couple options they could choose from. And then I started to break out my sessions. So session 1 would be explaining how to position fingers how to hold the instrument. What I'd like you to do now is think about a hobby that you have, and I'd like you to think about how could you teach that hobby to someone, and this will help you actively understand the process of really designing a course. So think about, what do you want the students to know before they came into the course? Are there specific things they already should come in with? What results and evidence do I want at the end of this course? And then map out how you might start with the first session. So this will give us kind of a good understanding about how the process works. So think about, what are the basics for this hobby? What should someone be able to know, understand, and do when they leave the class or the course? How are you going to measure it? How are you going to know if they can do that? And think about how many sessions and how long it would take to learn the basics. Thanks for listening to this short video about adult learning, and I look forward to having a more further discussion about your hobby that you're going to teach.